Dr. Jaimini Vyas welcome you on behalf of Knowledge Consortium of Gujarat. I take a privilege to welcome our today's expert, Dr. Karthick Sridhar sir. Over a decade, Karthick Sridhar has served in the areas of assessments, ranking, ratings and accreditation in higher education. Apart from senior leadership roles in information technology, retail and healthcare, with deep interest in social entrepreneurship, he has led social impact innovative initiatives in rural and primary healthcare and projects aimed at curbing infant mortality rates. As a member of FICCI, Higher Education Council, he also invests his time towards policy formulation in higher education. Karthick sir is currently the Vice Chairman of the Indian Centre for Academic Ratings and Excellence, which is known as ICARE, which is India's pioneering global rankings advisory service company. With his keen interest and aspiration to building world-class universities in India, Karthick sir is one of India's most respected names and an accomplished expert with wealth of knowledge and experience of having worked with and advised prestigious global ranking and accreditation agencies and some India's prestigious institutions such as the Indian Institute of Science Bangalore, IIT Delhi, etc. and several government institutions. Karthick sir has been invited for consultative meetings and discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as President Pranab Mukherjee on multiple occasions. As a nominee of Vice Chancellor, he has been appointed as a member of Academic Advisory Committee, UGC Academic Staff College, Calicut University. He is also a columnist. A global citizen yet a true Indian at heart, the single most imperative goal Karthick wishes to achieve is to witness the inclusion of at least 5 of India's prestigious universities in the top 200 of the World University Ranking by 2025. Over and above this, in the year 2016, CNBC TV18 awarded him as the most inspirational young entrepreneur of the year. I heartily welcome you on behalf of Knowledge Consortium of Gujarat, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
That was a very nice and pretty long introduction. I think we could have avoided the length of the introduction, but I'm very, very humbled and thank you very much for having me here this lovely morning. And we have just about completed 1 year of the launch of the National Education Policy 2020, and it's an honor for all of us in India to be witnessing this historic and momentous occasion. I can see we have quite a gathering here, and we'll quickly take this session forward. So what we will be doing this morning is I will be giving an introductory overview of the National Education Policy 2020. Most of us who are here would have gone through the policy in the last 12 months in great detail. I'll take you through a quick overview of the policy, and then we will speak particularly about research, innovation, and ranking, which is what is the topic of this morning. So, and here we quickly get into the session. I warmly welcome you to the session on Research, Innovation and Rankings, organized by the Center for Education at the Knowledge Consortium of Gujarat, Department of Education, Government of Gujarat, under the theme 1 Year of Transformative Reforms under the National Education Policy 2020. Friends, as we all know, any academic institution is expected to perform 3 critical and major roles. One of them, of course, is teaching, the other being research and innovation, and the third being what is also known as the third mission, or the societal impact or the societal transformation role to be performed by any university or any academic institution for that matter. So there are 3. One is teaching, 2 research and innovation, and the third one is societal transformation. Friends, over the years, India has performed very well in two areas, teaching and societal transformation. And unfortunately, we have been lagging behind the areas of research and innovation. And it's time that India showcased a better performance in that area. As you all know today, India has a little over 1,000 higher education institutions, with about 150 of them are known as the institutions of national importance. And some of them are also known as the institutions of national eminence. There are about 150 plus, which are a combination of central, state, and private education institutions. Higher education institutions in India have shown a consistent growth, both in terms of quality and quantity of research in the past decade. India today globally ranks number 3rd in the area of global output of research. Our global output of research as a nation is about 5.3% of the total quantum of research published globally. It is very striking to note that the United States of America, which is so very popular for its higher education system, was very similar to what India is today, US was in the 19th century. And US in those days looked up to Germany and United Kingdom to emulate and be inspired by their research, who were considered pioneers at that point in time in 3 very critical and important areas of research. One is natural sciences, religion, and very interestingly, it was theology. India today is at a similar moment that US was. Now, what did US do in the 19th century? The watershed moment for US universities was the introduction of what was called as the Morrill Act in 1862, when land-grant universities were allowed to set up in the US that focused on their basic requirements, that focused on their local requirements. Most of the leading US universities that are there today in the US were set up as land-grant universities in the yesteryears, and they achieved their eminence on focusing on finding solutions to the problems faced by the society in the US at that point in time. Thanks to Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji's vision and determination, India, in our opinion, has finally found its moral moment with the approval of the National Education Policy exactly about a year ago, sometime on the 29th of July 2020. The National Education Policy is expected to transform the higher education landscape of India by making higher education institutions work on solutions to the problem rather than solutions looking for a problem. So in other words, we are trying to create a policy that will solve the problems of India by looking inwards and not necessarily looking outwards. What are the problems that our country has, and how can research institutions in our country collaborate together and bring about solutions to these problems? So what is it that the NEP is trying to do? The NEP is trying to do the following in very, very specific ways, 4 very critical, important aspects of the NEP. Number 1, Indian academia has traditionally been focused on research and development without much emphasis on the relevance and delivery. The establishment of the National Research Foundation, which in our opinion is one of the most important aspects of NEP, is the establishment of a research foundation which will be funded very heavily, and an equal opportunity will be provided to both public and private institutions to compete with each other and apply for the grant under the National Research Foundation and be able to perform better research. There is always an argument in this country that public institutions get more money than private institutions. Government of India, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, has broken the shackle and provided every institution an equal opportunity. The best will win. You are able to put together a competent proposal towards performing better research and better output in universities. Number 2, in order to unleash technology development potential of higher education institutions, our institutions need not only become multidisciplinary they not only should become unidisciplinary in what they do in terms of expertise, but also will have to become multidisciplinary in their scope and offerings. Institutions will have to collaborate with one another, publish better papers, garner better citations, and make a mark globally. And this is what NEP says in very critical terms. Number 3, with the goal of increasing the gross enrollment ratio of India. India today is at about, on an average, at about 26% GER as a nation. Of course, different states have different GERs. The South seems to be better performing than the North in certain areas. But on an average, we are at about 26%. And Government of India very clearly wants this 26% to move to about 50% by 2035. What it means is India not only needs to open up new higher education institutions, it also needs to augment capacity building and bring together some of the smaller ones to form a unique institution, one of its kind in the world, which is a collation of many small higher education institutions coming together. In fact, some of this work has already happened in the state of Gujarat, which has set up about 6 or 7 colleges have come together to become one large state university. Number 4, NEP is expected to bring in significant funding. For the first time in this country, a little over 6% of the GDP is going to be allocated to higher education, and a large portion of that will, of course, be in higher education. Friends, finally, under NEP 2020, Indian higher education institutions will focus on 3 I's: interdisciplinary research, industry connect, and internationalization. These are the 3 very critical pillars that are needed to elevate our institution to global standards. With these opening remarks, I once again welcome each one of you into the session on research, innovation, and rankings, brought to you by the Knowledge Consortium of Gujarat, Department of Education, Government of Gujarat. I will now quickly move on to the formal part of the session, which is putting together some slides and taking you through different aspects of NEP and why research and rankings have become so critical to institutions to become globally eminent and important. We will now move to the presentation. Perfect. So here we go. This is the formal part of the session now that the overview on the national education policy is complete. The presentation is on research, innovation, and rankings, because we have successfully completed and are celebrating the 1 year of transformative reforms under the National Education Policy 2020. Is the second slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So we move on to the presentation. All of us are possibly representing the Indian higher education sector, and it's very, very important for us to be very, very proud and be knowledgeable about the sector that we are operating in. It's very important to note that after US and China, India has the world's largest higher education system anywhere in the globe. We have a little over 900 universities, 39,000 plus colleges, and about 12,000 standalone institutions. It's a moment of great pride that a little over 50% of our population is under the age of 25, and we are also one of the world's largest English-speaking populations. A little over 37.4 million students are enrolled in higher education as we speak, which means the enrollment in higher education in India is almost equal or sometimes more than the population of some of the countries. The most beautiful aspect of this is, for the first time in the last decade or so, women in India have started performing exceedingly well. And most recently, we saw our women becoming debut performance in the Tokyo Olympics. Very similar to that, in Indian higher education system also, women are performing very, very well. 48%, a little more than 48% of women are part of the 37.4 million who are enrolled in higher education. So which means the forward-looking India, women are going to be establishing a position of great respect, admiration, and repute. And we very clearly believe that women will take India forward into the next league. Our gross enrollment rate, to be precise, is about 26.3 on an all-India basis. The vision of Government of India is to have 30% as the GER by 2025, and India wants to have about 50 by 2035. Gross enrollment rate of 50, which means we will need to have a little more than 800 universities and about 45,000 plus colleges, which is going to be very difficult to establish physically, and hence technology in higher education is becoming more and more important, we can see the rising of different edtech companies in the country like Upgrad, Coursera, and others. They all combined, they are known as MOOCs, which is massive open online courses, which is becoming very, very popular globally. India has a challenge. Less than 10% of our institutions are accredited by NAC or NBA put together. Accreditation, of course, is a very, very important process of academic quality performance indicator, and it's important that more and more institutions are accredited at the earliest. It's very, very nice to see that organizations such as NAC and NBA are picking up great speed. NAC has created the revised accreditation framework, also known as the data validation and verification part, which is done by recognized and reputed third-party agencies in the country. More and more institutions should apply for accreditation by NAC and NBA. India also has this something that we took from the colonial rulers, which is an affiliated university structure. Most universities have more than 500 affiliated colleges. Some of them have a nightmare of about 800 or 1,000 colleges. Very, very difficult to administratively manage these. They become very large bodies. And hence, one of the aspects of NEP is autonomy. Several colleges that are able to showcase better performance can become degree granting institutions, one of the most important aspects of NEP. Moving to the national education policy, why is there so much of noise and so much of euphoria around the national education policy? If you go back historically, India developed its first national education policy sometime in 1968. In the years 1986 and 1992, the policy was tweaked upon. There were a few additions to the policy, but there was no massive transformation to the policy. 2018 and 19, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, the government of India believed that the future of India lies in the population which is in schooling and higher education today. In fact, the next Prime Minister, for all you know, will come out from the college that he is studying in today, he or she is studying in today. So it's very, very important to create a new India that appreciates the knowledge that is available, let's say, in the World Wide Web. Gone are the days where India had a Guru Shishya Parampara, where the Guru was supposed to be the lighthouse or the ivory tower of all the knowledge. Today, a student sitting in a classroom or anywhere in the hinterlands of India with a small smartphone in his hand has access to more data, more information than what one individual will ever have, or one professor will ever have in a classroom. And hence, to feed the aspiration of this new India, we need to have a new policy. We are actually educating students in our colleges and universities today, and we are getting them to be ready for the world. We do not know how that world will look. The world will be very, very different with artificial intelligence, with big data, with machine learning, with robots coming in almost, and drone technology really catching up. We don't know what kind of jobs and entrepreneurial activities will happen 10, 15, 20 years down the line. Now, to prepare the Indian population for that kind of a world, it's very, very important that we have a new and a massive transformation in policy, in thinking, and in implementation, and the national education policy is exactly doing that. For all of you who have seen the non-final plan of the national education policy, it's about 484 pages long. The final policy, which was released in NEP 2020, is about 65 pages, which is in some sense a collated version of all that was there in the 500 odd pages. What are the salient features of the national education policy? The 10 plus 2 is to be replaced by a 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. Now, one may ask, the 10 plus 2 model, when we have a public exam at the end of the 10th standard and another public exam of the 12th standard, really was functioning very, very well. And why break that? Why even look at repairing that when it is not broken? Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that model is long gone broken, because if you look at the competency of a child who is in the 5th standard on an average in India, the learning that the child has had on an average is equal to the 2nd or the 3rd standard of another country. A child who's supposed to perform certain mathematical functions, who's expected to show some ability, some capability in, let's say, an English language or a vernacular language ability, that student is unable to show that at the end of the fifth standard, at the end of the eighth standard, at the end of the 10th or the 11th standard. Many a times what happens, because our system of education, because our system of examination is based on rote learning, many students who complete the 10th standard do exceedingly well with a little over 90%, but when you have to apply that knowledge in a real life scenario, the student fails to apply that. And hence it's very, very important, and government believes it's very, very critical to have an exit examination at the end of 5th standard, at the end of the 8th standard, at the end of the 11th standard, and to have a formal system of education where a degree can become a 3-year and a 4-year degree, because many students who don't complete a 4-year degree in India are unable to go abroad and they have to take up another 1-year bridge course. So India wants to get onto the global bandwagon. And as you all know, the good old MHRD, which was the Ministry for Human Resource Development, is finally being rechristened in its new avatar of the Ministry of Education. It was earlier known as MHRD because that was the role that Government of India and Indian education institutions were performing. We were preparing a human resource to go and join an employment system in a company. We were getting people ready for companies, which again was a very colonial practice, which has now gone by in the past. Today we have the new Ministry of Education. Under the Education Quality Upgradation Plan, Government of India has committed to invest a little more than 1.5 lakh crores in the next 5 years in education to build and upgrade the quality of institutions in our country. While by 2020 we wanted to have that, but in the future we will have only 3 types of institutions in this country. You will either be part of a research university, or you will play a role as a teaching university, or you will become an autonomous college, with many colleges who will have degree granting abilities. The Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog is expected to replace all the multiple statutory bodies that we have in our country, which means a lot of rules and regulations and the shackles of the past era is going to be broken down. There will be autonomy to institutions to provide them with the freedom to become world class. NAC, of course, will also rechristen itself. NAC will encourage private participation to become accreditation agencies. By 2030, if institutions are not fully accredited, Government of India will ask institutions to become either compliant or close down, because if you are not compliant with quality, if you're not able to give quality to the end stakeholder, institutions will have very little relevance. Rather than Government of India asking them to close down, there will be a public movement where students will stop going to such institutions and they will have to close down by themselves. Of course, we also spoke about the National Research Foundation with about 20,000 crore rupees available every year. Government of India is also committed to spending a little more than 6% of GDP on education. Now, we all have heard a lot about rankings. Why is it so important? Why does an institution need to be ranked, rated, or accredited? If you look at past historical data, between the years 2000 and 2012, a little more than 4.5 million students, which is about 45 to 50 lakh students in the last decade, have traveled outside their home country for the single most decision of their life, which is education, particularly higher education. Students have gone beyond borders. They have not only left their streets and villages and towns and cities, but they've also left their country, gone to a new country to undertake a better career for themselves. Now, when students go out of the country, they need to know within a particular country which university is good for me, which university is a high-ranking institution, which university is good for a certain subject. And rankings, ratings, and accreditation perform this exercise of putting together a lot of data about institutions and presenting to the stakeholders what is called as a top-down approach in presenting a list of institutions on the basis of data, on the basis of performance. Now, what parameters they use can always be debated, but it's very, very important that institutions are benchmarked so that the stakeholders, the employers, the students, the parents, they all know which institution is better than the other. How do I separate the wheat from the chaff? Now, if that is global data, you may ask, this is global data, why should India be bothered about ranking? In the same decade, if you look at a similar number of students have left their states, a little more than 37 lakh students, 3.7 million students have migrated only and only for education. Maximum student migration in that decade has happened to Karnataka and Maharashtra. Maximum students have traveled out of Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal, and within the state, maximum students have been traveling from one town to another, one city to another, between the states of Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra. Which means there is so much of student mobility happening. It's important that these students get an idea, get an insight, and get a very clear information about which university is good for me to pursue my education for the single most important reason of my career. Now, what are the challenges that such students face? Of course, there is increasing cost. If you move from one city to another, you move from one town to another, one village to another, or one country to another, there is the burden of increasing cost between one university and another. But while student faces a lot of challenge, the most two important challenges faced by a student, one is generic marketing messages and information overload. All the universities today, you open up any magazine, any e-magazine, any newspaper, you will find during the admission cycle, every university claiming to be number one. Number one in a city, number one in a town, number one established in the last 10 years, so on and so forth. So with so much of information overload, Government of India was very rightly placed in the year 2014, took the recommendation of an organization called the Indian Center for Academic Rankings and Excellence, called ICARE, and created what is today called as the National Institutional Ranking Framework. The NIRF ranking is India's most prestigious ranking system, where a little more than 2,000 plus institutions are participating and competing to be known as some of the finest institutions in this country. Now, having spoken so much about the importance of rankings, do rankings have any criticisms? Yes, and a lot. The naysayers of ranking, the ones who have a negative approach about rankings, will call them biased, dangerous, and controversial. The ones who are fairly positive about rankings will call it inevitable, simple, useful, and powerful. But for the sake of this presentation, we need not be negative about ranking, we need not be positive about ranking, but if we can learn a lot from rankings, if we can take rankings as a benchmarking tool, if we can look at rankings as an exercise to look inwards and ask ourselves, if this is where I'm ranked at, what are those areas that are my strengths? What are those areas that are my weaknesses? How do I build upon my strengths? How do I focus on bridging the gaps of my weaknesses? And how can I become one of the great institutions in the country and the world? Rankings will give you a sense of a mirror. Ranking will give you a sense of a report card of where you are so that you are able to decide on where you want to go. Now, if we have to particularly look at India, the National Institutional Ranking Framework is definitely one of the foremost and the most important and perhaps the most trusted ranking framework. Do we have similar models across the globe? Yes. While we have a dozen and more ranking systems globally, 3 ranking systems have tend to become very, very popular across the globe. Now, let's look at the history of these rankings. It was in the year 2003, the then Chinese government wanted to benchmark itself against the Western world. So the government at that point in time put together a study to be undertaken by a university called Shanghai Jiaotong University in China. Sometime in 2003, they created a ranking system called the Academic Ranking of World Universities. Surprisingly, Chinese universities didn't do very, very well. And they're very low placed in comparison to their counterparts of the European nations. QS and Times Higher Education got together and sometime in 2004 put together the first world university rankings. They were working together, they were jointly publishing the rankings. 2009, Times of Education came out of the relationship with QS and established another ranking system, which was published in 2010. Of course, there are a range of ranking systems in India and the globe. It all depends on what parameters that they use, what really makes sense for a university or a college, and which parameters you want to provide more emphasis to. Each of us can decide to choose the ranking system that we intend to follow. Now, what are the ranking parameters of the three most popular ranking systems in the world? The academic ranking of world universities looks at the size of the university, the total number of students, and the total number of faculty. It also looks at articles in cited index and high cited index, such as the Science Citation Index and Social Science Citation Indices. It also looks at papers in very reputable publications such as Nature and Science, the presence of highly cited researchers on campus, and of course, they also look at faculty awards and alumni awards. Now, they don't necessarily look at the Padma Awards of India, but they look at a Nobel Prize winner who is a faculty member in your campus, or an alumni who has gone out and received a Nobel Prize, and there would be a score that the university will receive if they've had one such student, faculty, or alumni. Now, in terms of faculty awards, they also look at a field medal. Unfortunately for India, a field medal is provided only in the area of mathematics and also to a faculty member who's under the age of 40. By the time you become a full professor in India, many a times you're well over the age of 40, so many Indians are not considered for this award. India will have to do a lot more to be able to compete effectively in many of these awards. QS and Times Higher Education on the other end are fairly similar. Both of them have looked at innovation and internationalization with slightly different parameters. QS looks at citations per faculty, total number of citations produced by the university divided by the total number of faculty on campus. It also looks at internationalization, a faculty-student ratio, and two important elements from a QS standpoint of view are employee reputation and academic reputation. Times Higher Education is also fairly similar in that direction. Now, the World University Rankings. Now, let's break down that and look at parameter by parameter. If any of you aim or have a vision of becoming a world-class university, you will need to really grill deep down and have this one slide with you all the time to understand what are the parameters on which a world-class university is being judged upon. 40% of the, in fact, there are two portions to the World University Rankings. You have a top and a bottom portion. The blue and the yellow buttons are known as the subjective portion of the ranking, and the red, green, blue, and orange are the objective or the data-oriented aspects of the ranking. In terms of subjectivity, a heavy 50% of the data emphasis is laid on perception. How well is your institution known globally? So a heavy 40% is laid on academic reputation. What is the reputation of your university in the minds of global leaders, in the minds of global academicians? And a 10% emphasis is on employee reputation, the reputation of your institution in the eyes of the stakeholder community, in the eyes of the employer community globally. Now here, if your institution were to receive a survey participant from outside of India, you would get a better score. If the participant were from India, the score is much lesser. In terms of all the other parameters, so the top one is 50%. Let's look at the other 50%. The other 50% comprises of faculty-student ratio, which is a 20% heavy weightage, citations per faculty, another 20%, and internationalization, which puts together international faculty and international students, which is about 5% each. So put together, this is the 100% weightage of the QS World University Rankings. Now there is a debate as to why Indian universities are not present in the top? Why are Indian universities not able to do well in the top 200 or the top 100 of the world university rankings? And why do we have such a low presence there? Let me tell you, perception and reputation cannot be built overnight. It takes time. It takes several years for institution to perform research and innovation and be at it. And sometimes it takes a decade or more or several decades for the institution to get global acclaim, global respect, global recognition, and global repute. Now let's look at some of that data. So if you look at the average age of a university in the top 25 of the world university rankings, it's about 241 years. Of course, the average becomes very high because of the presence of the Cambridge and Oxford, which are little over 800 years old. Now, if you look at country, Singapore is the youngest country with an average age of about 74 years and has been able to make it to the top. India's average age would probably be around that of Singapore. So we can definitely take Singapore as a classic example. If NUS and NTU can be firmly footed into the world university rankings, I think some of our IITs and the golden age universities of India, which are very old and prestigious, should be able to make that mark in the years to come. Friends, sometimes it's also very important to look beyond the rankings. Rankings are, in my very strong opinion, rankings should become an outcome of all the good work that you do within the institution, should not become the means to the end. A lot of good work that you do within the institution will have great impact, the outcome of which could be a good rank. Many a times, all the good work that you do within an institution could play a great role in societal transformation. Many a times may not be able to give you a good rank. A classic example could be a university that is in the hinterlands, performing the role of horticulture, performing the role of art and music, performing the role of, let's say, architecture or agriculture for that matter, may not give you a good rank. If you are perhaps a great skill university, for example, I am aware of one skill university called the Centurion University in the hinterlands of Orissa, which actually which performs in the what is called as the Maoist belt or the thick of the tribal belt, performs great work, and some of its students have gone globally and won a lot of awards. But unfortunately, that university will probably never be in the top 10 of the traditional ranking because a skill university may not be promoting research as much as a traditional research university. And hence, let a poor rank do not bring you down, let it not bring you emotionally down, and let not a great rank also uplift you. Let's understand what is it that our region needs, what is the problem that India is facing, and that is exactly what NEP is all about. NEP very clearly tells India that, look, India has its own challenges and we now need institutions to live up to those challenges, create solutions to those challenges, and you could become one of India's eminent institutions. For example, there is one university again in Orissa called KIT, which may not be a world-class university, but in India is known as an institution of eminence. So let's also look at many a times a good performance may not lead to a great rank. For example, in India, if you look at our GDP in purchasing power parity terms, an economic indicator, we are far ahead than UK, Germany, Australia, South Korea, and Hong Kong. But unfortunately, Hong Kong has 5 universities in the top 200 of the world university rankings. India has only 2 in the top 200. In terms of research output, in terms of sheer number, as I said, we are about 5.3. We are doing fairly well. And sometimes in terms of research performance, in terms of paper productivity, we do much better than Australia, South Korea, and Hong Kong. Unfortunately, in a research ranking, India does not perform well. Research quality again, because of the size and scale that India has, we garner a lot of citations, much more than countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, and South Korea can. They're smaller nations. Of course, there is a difference and we will have to do some bit of normalization. But otherwise, in pure number terms, we are much higher. Research quality is better, research numbers are higher, but in research rankings, we are low. In terms of patents, again, some of the patents that we have put together are far more greater in numbers than some of the other countries. However, we don't get very, very well ranked in terms of a research parameter in a global ranking. So many a times a good performance may not lead to a great ranking. We have to live with it. Ranking systems are here to stay. We accept it or reject it. The world is looking at us. They're looking at us very, very closely, and we need to look at these parameters and see how we can perform better, not necessarily be bogged down by a poor ranking. Now, do ranking systems have many challenges? Yes. If you take the world university rankings per se, it considers India as one nation. A student who travels all the way from Jammu Kashmir to Kanyakumari will be seen as a domestic student. But on the other hand, if you were at Netherlands, Belgium, Poland or Switzerland and you jumped the wall and went to Germany to pursue your education, you will be known as a foreign student. You would be known as a foreign teacher if you were to move there to teach that. The global ranking agencies will perhaps say that these are landlocked nations and separated by language. Now, if separated by language were a metric for difference between the countries, India has about 22 major languages with 13 different scripts and about 720 dialects. So a student who goes, let's say, from Northeast to Tamil Nadu should be, in my opinion, considered as a foreign student, and we should give him a score on the global rankings. This, unfortunately, at the moment does not happen. The global ranking agencies put together something called the academic performance or the academic surveys, where if you look at some of their past data, a little more than 75,000 people have participated. Academicians globally have participated in that survey. Unfortunately, at that point in time, India was only about 2.3 or 2.4% of participation, which means India's participation on these global academic surveys by itself is very, very less. India will have to push its performance in such, and we will also have to do a lot more to get global acclaim to our work so that more and more people participating in this research target Indian institutions as good or rate Indian institutions as good institutions. India's research performance, if we let go of the two and a half years of COVID-19, has been fairly okay. We have published a little more than 650,000 papers, which has garnered us about 2 million citations. India has an average of about 3.2 citations per document at that point in time. This is, I think, data till about 2016, 2018. 17% of our papers are with international collaborations, a very, very low number. We definitely need to increase this number. And 0.8% of our papers are with corporate collaborations or what is known as the academic corporate linkages. The corporate academia linkage in our country is the lowest. And this is something that really needs to be pushed up. 0.8 is a very, very sorry number. Now, this is a classic example. For all those who publish research in India, there is one major challenge. Most of our institutions in India are known by multiple names. Here's a classic example of one of India's oldest private universities, one of India's institutions of eminence, one of India's first universities in the private domain to be ranked at the top, called the Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Institution of Eminence deemed to be university. If you look at the different names in which the university publishes research, there are a little over 20 names. Unfortunately, the global ranking agencies will know this university only by one name. So it's important for Indian institutions to do two things. Number one, we will need to have a discussion with the research database companies like Elsevier or Clarivate Analytics and give them all our names under which we publish research so that they're able to bring all of that under one umbrella. If not done so, a lot of our research will be lost in transit. Number two, the Dean of Research across all institutions should mandate that research must only be published under one formal official name. It's very, very unfair to be publishing research in several names. We will give you another example. If you look at another reputed university from Karnataka called the MS Ramaiah University, you will find that a great institution sometimes loses its papers in transit because it publishes under 10 different names. Our own IIT Bombay, for an example, used to publish papers under 6 different names. IIT Bombay, IIT Mumbai, IIT Powai, and then Indian Institute of Technology Bombay, the same name under Powai and Mumbai. So there are 6 different names. Unfortunately, global ranking agencies or the ones who go through Scopus and Accredited analytics will only look at one name. So it's very, very important that we do this, we set the house in order and ensure that all the papers are brought in together. Now, most of our institutions in India, possibly many of our participants here, may have participated in the National Institutional Ranking Framework or any other ranking exercise for that matter. What do we do many a times? We get a particular rank. Let's say one of us was ranked at number 72 in the top 100. Now, why were we at 72? Why were we not at 70? Why were we not at 80? Is a very, very important question that we need to ask ourselves. So it's very, very important that each of us breaks down the ranking system by indicator and by parameter and then by sub-parameters and sub-indicators. And look at what was the total mark available in that indicator, what have we scored. To give you an example of this particular sheet that you're looking at, this university has scored a 0 on capital expenditure, has scored a 0 on earnings from EDP, has scored a 0 on students from other state, and has scored a 0 on students from other countries. For all you know, all of this data is very, very easily available within the university. This data was never brought out. So first, we will need to set our house in order, ensure that all the data is available under one particular head, and that one particular head is responsible for providing data to any third-party agency outside of that institution. Once the ranking system, once we decide we need to participate in a ranking, in an assessment, in an accreditation, what are the 3 most critical and important items that we need to focus on? The 3 most important and critical systems that we will need to focus on is knowledge, data, and action. Now, very, very important that good and great performance of institutions comes from strong knowledge. Institution leaders will need to take up this task of providing complete understanding of every parameter, every metric, every indicator, and the definition across all assessments. Unless and until people do not know on what parameters they're going to be judged upon, they will really not know what are the parameters that we need to improve upon. It's very, very critical that in an accreditation system, particularly, everybody from the doorman to the chairman is involved. Unless and until everybody is involved in working together. It's like hockey. You can't have one goalkeeper always saving the goals and the other participants or other players not performing well. Similar is the case of cricket. So very, very similar in the case of a university, unless and until everybody does not come together and work towards one single goal and objective, a university will not be able to perform well globally. Now that the knowledge is going to be in place, and let's say you took this advice and you decided that every institution member within my campus will have all the required knowledge, what is the next most important aspect? And this is a very, very critical aspect, particularly to India, because many times we do not have this in our campus. Data. A very, very good performance will come only from quality data. We need to ensure that all our members, we handhold them to the entire process of collecting data. Many a times, since we don't have proper ERP systems in most of our campuses, the data is available in files, papers, books, and records. All that data will have to be brought together and we will have to put them in the form of Excel sheets. Very, very important that each of our institution has a committee for ranking. Many of us will have something called the IQAC. It's called the internal quality cell within most colleges and universities. We will also need to have a data cell or what is called as a rankings committee to ensure that all the data is available in one central system, one central place within the campus. And of course, the biggest challenge that any global ranking agency faces from India is availability of data and timely availability of data. India has so many festivals and so many government holidays that many of our institutions keep asking for extension. We say there is a Diwali, there is a Holi, there is a Dasera, there is a Raksha Bandhan, and the very traditional aspects of performance of festivals, most of our institutions are closed and we are unable to provide data. That shouldn't happen. If we have to live and work on a global platform, the world is flat today. If we have to participate in the Olympics, we need to be in Tokyo. We can't say we missed our flight because we had a festival back at home. Similarly, you can't say I was unable to participate in a global ranking exercise because I had a Diwali festival. Whether it's a festival or not, timely submission of data is very, very critical. And finally, action. What is life without some action? While you know all of this, importance of ranking is known, importance of assessment is known, the required knowledge is there, the required data is available, the required action in terms of data submission has been done. What do we do after that? Once we provide data to a ranking agency or an accreditation agency, once we get a report, it's very, very important before we decide to be upset about it or celebrate about it, we will need to do a gap analysis report. Why did we fall? Where are we today? Where do we intend to go 5 years down the line? What is our 10-year plan? How did I break it down into 1 year each? And what do I intend to do at the end of 1 year? And we will also need to do a gap analysis after 1 year to understand whether we did what we aimed to do. We need to identify areas of improvements, design strategies for continuous improvement. Unless and until we do not put together a roadmap, we will not have a direction, we will lose our goal, we will not be able to move forward. Having said this, do we have challenges with academic leaders? Yes, many of us are academic friends who have become vice chancellors, directors. There are certain challenges about them. They will also need to look internally and find out where they were when they were a researcher, when they were a scholar, when they were an academic individual, and what happened to them when they became a leader. Number one, many of them have gone into a shell and what is very globally and popularly known as an ivory tower approach. They really get into that corner office once they become a vice chancellor, and they're very, very secluded from the academic community within their own campus also. And of course, most academic leaders have a very poor social media connect. Many of them are not there on social media, so they don't even know what their institution is doing or other institutions are doing. Many of them have stopped research and teaching because they have got so much of academic, non-academic administrative activities to perform, sign papers, look at files, approvals, etc., etc. Many of them have gone into the area where the research and teaching performance has gone to an all-time low. Some of the world's best researchers and faculty members in some of the world's top universities are still teaching the undergraduate class. And it's very, very important to do that. So unless and until you do not get into the realm of teaching and academic research, you cannot really become a great academic leader. Of course, most of our academic leaders have very negligible alumni connect. Now, these are the law of averages. Of course, we have islands of excellence in this nation, but these are the averages. Corporate networking is a negative number in most of our universities. And of course, it's only now that we have started taking some action on Swayam, MOOCs, Coursera, Upgrad, etc. We will really need to push up our game over there. Now, what do academic leaders and the management that govern academic leaders in colleges need to do? Number one, we will need to provide autonomy in true form. And this is what NEP intends to do to us as a nation. So when NEP is doing to this, the Honorable Prime Minister is doing to this as a nation, to the higher education system, we as academic leaders will have to provide that to the line below. Autonomy in true form, very, very important to have academic upgradation, institution building through alumni support. If you look at the top universities in the globe, whether it's a Stanford, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, all of them have been built by their alumni. Why so much so that IIT Madras recently received a huge funding from some of their alumni. So the alumni have a great role to play in institutional building and upgradation. Very, very important that we bring in some of our alumni onto our governance platforms. Many of our institutions are not investing enough in faculty training and research. There is a fear that what will happen if we invest a lot in faculty training and research and they leave us. Very, very important to also question ourselves, what if we don't invest in them and they don't leave us and they stay back with us? Then what? So very, very important that we need to train them continuously. And also for us to become an institution of great eminence, it's not possible to become one if we do not look outside our own institution for academic linkages with institutions in the country and outside. Unless and until that happens, we are not going to win this game. We are almost towards the end of our presentation. There are three very, very critical and important slides that are coming now. So if there is any three slides that you want to take back home, I would suggest that these are the three most important slides each one of us should keep. Now, having said so much about national education policy, the role it's going to play in the transformation of India, the vision of Honorable Prime Minister, and what you must do in the area of research, innovation, and rankings from an NEP point of view, it's very, very important that you look at keys of success. If you ask me today, tell me only one thing that I need to do as a university or institution to succeed in the global arena of higher education, and that one thing is on the top left corner of your screen, and it's called papers. It's called paper productivity. It's called research productivity. If, as an institution, you decide to focus on putting more and more papers from your university, from your college, from your academic institution into a recognized journal which appears on a database, be it Elsevier Scopus or Clarivate Analytics, institutions will start performing very, very well automatically. Why? Because papers will lead over a period of time to citations. The more number of papers you have, chances are the more number of citations you will be able to garner. What do citations do? More number of citations and more number of papers together will help you increase your research collaboration to outside of your institution. Better research collaboration will give you access to better funding. Better citations will bring better international faculty to your campus. Better research collaboration and citations and funding will be able to give you great student experience. A great student experience will lead to better employability, and all of this put together will give you great reputation and a great web impact. More and more people will start speaking about your institution. More and more people will start recognizing your institution. More and more people will start respecting your institution only and only if you start immediately jumping onto the bandwagon of paper productivity. Having said that, we must not lose sight of paper quality. While productivity is important, quality, on the other hand, should go hand in hand. But it would be very unfair if you tell your researchers to only publish in the top tier journals. A publication in a top tier journal may take time. A publication in a Nature and Science may take 2 to 3 years, for example. But however, in that span of time, the ones who can really enhance your paper productivity should be given the support, should be given the autonomy, should be given access to the funding, and an environment of research culture needs to be created within that institution for it to become world class. This is the last 3 slides that we're taking you through. This is one of the last 3. The second of the last 3 slides. Now, world class is, while it is a destination, it's very, very important for you to realize that you cannot stop at that destination. It is an evolving journey. You will need to continue to be moving towards that journey. So colleges and institutions in India, what is a better method for you? And we thought we should put together a method to the so-called madness of becoming world class. Number one, and NAC has done this very, very beautifully. NAC has created something called the Academic and Administrative Audit. It's called the AAA exercise. it's highly recommended that each of our institutions go through a very detailed AAA audit, preferably by a recognized third-party agency that will help you understand all your strengths and weaknesses. While you go through the AAA audit exercise, most of you will have your data in place, and that data can be used to participate in a ranking exercise such as the National Institutional Ranking Framework, such as the Outlook ICARE India College and University Rankings, where you will be able to use your gap analysis that you've got from the AAA exercise to put together a very strong and a better performance in the NIRF and the other private ranking systems. Once you have all the right data and you participate in the ranking exercise, it is also very, very important that you go through the rigmarole of the National Assessment and Accreditation Council and the National Board of Assessments. Colleagues, it's very, very important for me to tell you at this juncture that NAC is an institutional level accreditation and NBA is a program level accreditation. What it means is if you have an engineering program, you need to go through an NBA exercise. Whether or not you have an NBA, it's very, very important for you to go through a NAC for your whole institution. And of course, very, very important at the end is the World University Rankings. You may not necessarily get into the world rankings per se immediately. You have levels over there, which is called the BRICS ranking, the Asia ranking, the subject rankings, and finally the World University Rankings. You may have a great subject. For example, you could be great at mechanical engineering. You may not be a great institution. You can perform well on the subject rankings and showcase yourself globally better over there. And the last slide that I may want to take you through is a slide that you must keep with you if possible. Have this as a printout in your office chamber, in some of your homes, because many a times India and Indians have done extremely well when the world thought that we are on the losing side. Sometime on the 28th of September 2014, the New York Times published this cartoon that you see on the left, that India is this poor, old, traditional country that is still moving about with its cows and plowing in the agriculture field and trying to knock hard on the doors of the elite space club. That is when India attempted to do something on the world stage in terms of space technology. We had a few failures. Of course, the New York Times did this, and it was a sheer insult to India and the 1 billion plus people that we have in India. Sometime in 2017, India and India's most reputed space agency called ISRO made all of us very, very proud by launching a record 103 satellites into space, not only at the shortest amount of time, but also in the shortest value of money. The money spent by India was cheaper to actually send these satellites to space, was cheaper than the making of the Hollywood movie called Gravity, which was on space itself. And that's the quality of India. We are able to do things not only in a great manner, but also in a timely manner and also in a cheaper manner. Most of the satellites that were part of that 103 were from the US. We actually carried satellites for others. The satellites were from US, from Kazakhstan, from Israel, from Netherlands, from Sweden, from Switzerland, and the UAE. Indian institutions must benchmark with the best in the world. We must undertake self-assessment. We must undertake improvement. We must excel and make a global print, a very strong global footprint of the world, and the rankings will follow. Similarly, today we have the global best companies in the world who are knocking the doors of our Indian universities for talent, who are knocking the doors of ISRO, because ISRO is able to do something better that no other organization in the world was able to showcase. Many of our universities should take ISRO as a great inspiration. There is never a failure that can put you behind. There is never a failure that can help you lose sight of your final goal. There is never a failure that is permanent. What is permanent is that India has finally performed well both in academia and sports. The Tokyo Olympics is a great example, ISRO is a great example, and Indian institutions will be able to take this great example. Honorable Prime Minister has given us a great platform in the name of the National Education Policy. Let us all embrace this together and ensure India finally makes its mark on the global footprint of academia. Thank you so much for being very patient with me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Over to KCG.
Thank you, Karthik sir, on the behalf of KCG. It was a wonderful session and very interactive and enthusiastic lecture it was. Thank you, sir.